Satish on behalf of our faculty administration and all the participants, because our respected Dean sir, he is busy with the video conferencing with the higher authorities in Bhopal. So let me introduce you to the topic on behalf of Dr. S.S. Tomar, our respected Dean sir. Basic knowledge of cardiology, clinical facts, and new advancements of different diagnostic techniques, imaging modalities, etc., are very essential for accurate treatment of cardiac ailments. This is only possible if one has in-depth knowledge of these diagnostic modalities. Step-by-step practical approach to disease diagnosis is very important for practicing internal medicine, cardiac surgery, interventional cardiology. Hands-on training and workshop on these techniques very necessary to learn these advanced techniques and apply them practically. Today, in this pandemic outbreak of COVID-19, it has become an hindrance in our mobility and learning these techniques in practically in person. Taking this into consideration, we have organized a one-day international workshop on holistic approach towards diagnosis and management of cardiac disorders, hoping to help the students practicing veterinarians and clinicians in their field cases. Our today's expert speaker, Dr. K. Satish Kumar, has over 15 years of experience and knowledge in the field of cardiology, internal medicine, and non-invasive diagnostic techniques, and he would enlighten us with his knowledge and experience. I welcome you, Dr. K. Satish Kumar, on behalf of our faculty members, organizing committee, and all the participants. Over to you, Dr. Satish.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aditi. So now I think I can share the presentation. Dr. Nilesh, what do you say?
Yes, sir.
So is it visible now?
It's coming, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please make it full screen, sir.
Yeah, it's already in slideshow mode, full screen.
No, it has not been full screen, sir.
Not yet? It's already in full screen mode, slideshow mode.
Sir, kindly click on the down full screen mode.
Yes, yes. I made it full screen only, Nilesh. Is it not visible like that?
It's not visible like that, sir.
Just a second. I will do it again. What do you say now?
No, sir. Change.
Now?
No, sir. No change. Kindly change the slides, then it may work.
Okay. Now?
नहीं sir.
वो प्रीव्यू मोड में भी चेंज हो रहा है क्या स्लाइड्स?
नहीं हो रहा सर.
स्लाइड्स चेंज भी नहीं हो रहे हैं?
नहीं सर. एक बार सर स्टॉप प्रेजेंटिंग करके और दोबारा से कीजिए सर.
Okay. I'll share it again. I mean.
Yes sir.
Now?
Yes sir, now it's okay.
It's right now, full screen mode. Can you see the change on slide?
Yes sir, it's okay. 1 second sir, one Vimlesh Patel, anyone is present? All participants are requested not to present themselves. Sir, you have to again start presenting, sir.
Oh,
So after stop presenting, then you have to again. Yes, sir.
I have to stop sharing. Do
Yes,
stop
sir.
sharing.
Yes, sir. Stop screen sharing and then now again, sir. Yes, sir. It's okay, sir.
Yeah, it's fine now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So, good afternoon, all of you. Today we are going to talk about the diagnosis and management of cardiac disorders in dogs. Actually, this topic has been discussed previously by several other speakers, eminent speakers last week by Dr. Ajit Kumar and Dr. J.P. Varshne, and many more were talking about this topic during the last week. I think many of you have also attended those presentations and webinars, and you have learned so many things in that. I wish you will also enjoy my presentation and learn new things, if possible, through my presentation. So, going into our topic without wasting much time. See, actually, I just want to make a small differentiation between the human and animal cardiology or cardiologists, what we are facing now in day-to-day life. See, for example, if it is a human patient, he says everything, he expresses everything, but whereas our patients, we are just unfortunate to have that kind of ability from our patients. So whatever they feel, we should have to realize that, and then we have to find out certain other things and other abnormalities to proceed with the diagnosis. Like any other disease, the cardiology or cardiac disease in animals also has become very difficult to touch. So it's not like with humans where he comes and expresses his difficulty. So this is the basic flaw where actually I think we are not able to diagnose certain many more diseases like humans, what we are doing. But still, leaving all those difficulties and constraints aside, we are also running on par with and reaching the top of the medical profession and reaching on par with the medical profession, as a matter of fact. So when it comes to the diagnosis on human cardiology, they started with stethoscope using, auscultation, and then they proceeded with many of these diagnostic procedures, and they crossed the CT scan of the heart. They reached to bypass surgery. They carried out. They are doing open heart surgeries, beating heart surgeries, and many more to diagnose and to treat the conditions. And it's very interesting for us to know that they have also reached to a stage where they were doing these heart transplantations, which is maybe not imaginable in our near future in case of veterinary profession, but still we are no way inferior to them. So if we talk about canine cardiology or diagnosis of cardiac disease and management in Indian scenario, we say that I can say that to my knowledge, like this area has started some few decades ago, maybe 30-40 years ago. It started in certain pointed institutes like Madras Veterinary College or Bombay Veterinary College or somewhere in Karnataka. Like there are many more institutes or colleges or universities where the cardiology has started few decades ago, but still we say that we are in primitive conditions, a primitive stage. Why? What is the reason for that? Like I can say that maybe due to the facilities that we don't have, or maybe due to the non-specific signs that the patients will exhibit every day, even though they suffer with severe cardiac disorders or abnormalities. And most of the times, the diagnosis goes misdiagnosed because the manifestations are non-specific. And the most primitive or the most specific and most strong reason why we fail in many of the diagnoses is lack of communication between the patients and the doctor. Not always, I mean to say that it is a medical communication that they cannot speak out, right? So we have to diagnose, we have to reach to their level, and we have to we have to dig into. Like we have, though we have our own methods of diagnosing the case, but it's easy for the human practitioner to find out what is really happening if the patient says that he has got a heart problem or a headache or something like that. So yes, these are all the constraints I mean to say, but in spite of these constraints, I would like to say that we have reached to a stage where there are pacemaker transplantations. This is a Cocker Spaniel, first Cocker Spaniel, or first dog in India, which has underwent a pacemaker transplantation by a doctor, a veterinarian. If I remember, he's Dr. Banu, maybe somewhere from Pune or somewhere. But so this is where we are actually. Whatever the facilities we have, whatever constraints we have, but still we are trying to exhale ourselves in reaching to on par with the human cardiologists. Okay, so but I mean to say that most of the vets, even in the present scenario, except very few, most of the vets and many of the times, we always depend on the manifestations. Like any other disease or any other condition or any other abnormality or any other organ dysfunction, for cardiology or cardiac dysfunctions, cardiac disorders also, most of the vets, they depend on the manifestations, and we'll be trying to treat the case, whatever the facilities we have with them and they have with them. So if you start with this, so keeping this in mind and keeping this in mind or in view, my presentation, I would like to present this and I would like to discuss about how we approach to a case of a dog, that is presented with any suspected cardiac disease, or I can say if the dog is presented with certain manifestations. So how do we approach to that? How do we proceed with diagnosing or confirming a cardiac disease in a dog? So we'll start with the manifestations. Yes, obviously we start with the manifestations, and as I was talking to you, the manifestations of cardiac disorders or cardiac diseases are very unspecific or non-specific, we can say. They're not specific to say that yes, this is of cardiac origin, because we may be presented with dogs that were having breathing difficulty or dyspnea, like this open mouth breathing. Okay, and nostrils, look at the nostrils were widely open, so it is a typical way of expressing the dyspnea. So this is one manifestation which the dog is presented with. Or the dog may be also presented with a history of saying that my dog is unable to lie down, and he's having, yes, equally is having dyspnea. And look at the position, posture on the how the dog is sitting, which is an orthopnic posture. Okay, and abducted elbow, this is another one. And yes, okay, we can't. So this is a cuff actually. I'm sorry, I could not make it to listen this, but so I mean to say that these are the only 3 or 4 specific or non-specific, whatever you say, the manifestations with which the dogs are presented for a practitioner or a clinician or a vet or a doctor, whoever we call them. So we have to dig in to these cases, and we have to reach to that level where we can come up with the specific complaint of a cardiac disorder. So suppose if the dog is having valvular disease, may have the same manifestation, or if the dog is having a pericardial effusion, may have the same difficulty, or if the dog is having a atrial septal defect, or we'll have the same kind of manifestations. So it is the role, it's the duty, it's the challenge for the practitioner or a cardiologist or veterinary cardiologist to reach to that level and to find out, yes, what is actually wrong with the heart, whether it is a myocardial disease or a pericardial disease.
Sorry to disturb you. Sorry to interrupt you once again.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, your presentation gone again, sir. Someone pressed the button present now. Someone, Dr. Priyanka, she pressed the button present now. That's why.
Okay. So you want me to restart again?
Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't know where I discontinued and where I got disconnected, but let's see that these are the 3 manifestations of a patient that is presented or presented with suspected cardiac complaint. So we have to be work with these kind of manifestations, and to reach at the confirmatory diagnosis, it's a big challenge for a veterinarian. So I mean to say that these are the specific manifestations. Now I can say that these are the specific and of course common manifestations for cardiac disease, though they are also seen with other organ specific complaints. But as we are dealing with cardiac complaints and cardiac disorders, I say that specific cardiac disorders, they have an open mouth breathing, dyspnea, and dilated nostrils here, where the dog is really struggling for breathe, or air hunger, exothermic appearance, and exercise intolerance, reluctance to move, like always they tries to have not interested to walk. And very much interesting point here to note with the cardiology patients of dogs is in humans, usually the obesity or obese persons are more prone for cardiac complaints, whereas in dogs, not the obese dogs, but emaciated. The cardiac patient is presented in a cachectic condition. This is called as a cardiac cachexia, which is a typical feature with any of these manifestations. If the dog is going down in condition with emaciated or a cachectic condition, we can suspect that it could be of cardiac origin. Apart from those manifestations, yes, some of the dogs are also presented with ascites, and some may also have pedal edema, though it is not common in case of pets, dogs, but sometimes some of the dogs are also presented with pedal edema. And another important complaint, what the owners complain about their pets is, always trying to stand and sit for a longer period. There is insomnolence, like they don't sleep either day or night, and for the days together they'll be just standing or sitting. And even if suppose sometimes in case if they want to sleep and if they need to sleep, they will sleep in this posture, like keeping their chin little at an elevated posture. So these are some of a handful, I can say a handful of manifestations which are presented with when the dog is suspected for cardiac disease. So when any dog that is presented with either of these manifestations, now it's our duty to proceed with, like that mean I mean to say that how to proceed with these dogs to know whether there is any cardiac disorder or not. So like any other case, we start with the history, but here sometimes some dogs that are presented with very acute condition and very hypoxic stage, or when the dog is very recumbent or very critical condition where we don't have much time to look for the history and to carry out the history for a longer period. So we can skip that with very few questions asking that how long the dog is present and what's the age of the dog, or any other specific manifestations like that. Apart from that, asking from a very lengthy and detailed history may be avoided, particularly in case of cardiac patients if they are presented in a very critical stage. Then coming to the observations, yes, this is very much important. So as we were talking about, we should look for the body condition score. If the dog is presented in a basic condition and with other manifestations, most probably it may not be of cardiac patient. But on the other hand, if the dog is lean, emaciated, cachectic with other manifestations, what we have seen, probably it could be a cardiac patient. But if the dog is obese and with other manifestations of dyspnea, lethargy, etc., there is a possibility of secondary dilated cardiomyopathy associated with hypothyroidism. So, but most probably it may not be a cardiac patient. And coming to the breathing, as we have seen the dyspnea, this is again an interesting observation we notice with the patients with cardiac complaints, and very much low energy levels, as I was talking previously. The affected patient will be very reluctant to walk, very reluctant to play, and the owner comes and complains that my dog always tries to avoid the play, and he was very active previously. Now the active levels or energy levels has gone down. Then coming to the mucosa, yes, we have to check for the mucosa and see that most of the times the cardiac patients, they have pale mucosa, maybe due to poor perfusion, and capillary refill time will be very much high. And sometimes the mucosa may also be presented as cyanotic mucosa, either of these two, either pale mucosa or cyanotic mucosa may also be taken under cardiac complaint. And yes, pulse is again another important, interesting feature to diagnose cardiac disease. Most of the times we check the pulse at the femoral artery, but in this case, normally it is a combined means of auscultation and recording the pulse will help to identify any cardiac associated complaints, because if we do this auscultation and simultaneous pulse recording, so normally you should find a pulse wave that syncs with the systolic beat here. So if it is not syncing with the systolic beat, or if the pulse is very weak and feeble, and if you are unable to feel the pulse, then most probably it could be of any cardiac disease. Then we can also examine or observe for the jugular vein. The distended jugular vein, commonly noticed when the dog is having a right heart failure, so we can try to observe for that also. And yes, of course, lastly, the edema. So it may be either ascites, or as I was talking about pedal edema, maybe sometimes may also be noticed. So when your observations meet with this list of observations, either one or many of these observations, then our suspicion towards cardiac disease is getting strong and stronger. So once we finish this observation, we go to the physical examination. Yes, after coming up with many of the advanced diagnostic techniques, even in veterinary practice, like ultrasonography, echocardiography, and CT, MRI, etc., etc. The basic things were being not practically being used most of the times, and most of the practitioners, they are just ignoring it. But this is very basic diagnostic protocol of the test to identify or suspect the cardiac diseases. So what is the basic thing, or the first preliminary thing for every one of us who is using stethoscope is like how to put this in your ears. So this should be positioned in this way. The ear knobs, they should be directed anteriorly so that they will fix into your earlobe. If you put it in a reverse way, probably you cannot hear very clearly, you cannot auscultate very clearly. So this is one point I would like to mention here. Then coming to where to auscultate. Yes, everybody knows that heart can be auscultated from left side, but on the left side, the position of the heart is between third to fifth intercostal space. So we can auscultate the heart for general purpose. If you want to know the heartbeat, or if you want to count the heart rate, you can just auscultate from any point of anywhere between third to fifth intercostal space, either on the left or on the right side. But when it comes to auscultation of a specific cardiac disease, or when we are doing this auscultation to identify or to check the valvular condition, or the condition of the various valves that are present in the heart, so we have a specific site or location to auscultate. So let's see this. Yeah, so as I was talking about, the position of the heart is between third, fourth, and fifth intercostal space. So if you want to auscultate the mitral valve, we have a specific area. Auscultate for aortic valve, we have a specific area, and auscultate the pulmonary valve, we have the specific area. So auscultation will give us the status of the various valves that are present on the left side and also that are present on the right side. So to make it very clear, and to make you remember this mnemonics of this, I can say PAM, PAM, P at the third intercostal space, A at the fourth intercostal space, and M at the fifth intercostal space. So you start auscultating the heart from the sternum and then slightly come up towards the point of shoulder. So if you are doing that at the third intercostal space, whatever the sound you are listening, that is the pulmonary valves, and whatever the sounds you are hearing at the fourth intercostal space is the aortic valve, and at the fifth intercostal space is the mitral valve. This is about the auscultation of the heart from the left side. And if you do that from the right side, what we can hear is about the tricuspid valve. And the tricuspid valve is located at the fourth intercostal space on right side. So leaving the third and fifth intercostal space on left side, on right side, if you auscultate at the fourth intercostal space, what we get is the tricuspid valve sounds. So this is how, again, this is where your suspicion is still further been getting stronger if you notice any murmurs or any abnormal sounds. Okay, so once you finish the auscultation, the next step is about the ECG findings. So yes, ECG will give us about the abnormalities that are associated with peak QRST waves. So that may be the abnormalities of P wave, maybe the abnormalities of QRS wave, or maybe the abnormalities of T wave. So any of these abnormalities would indicate the chamber enlargement or chamber size, or abnormalities related to excuse me, give me some time. Yeah. So the most common abnormalities what we notice with ECG is the PQRST. As we have studied this in ECG, the P wave abnormalities are suggestive of atrial abnormalities or abnormalities related to the atrium, and QRS is related to the abnormalities of the ventricles, and T wave. Most of the times, the T wave abnormalities are related to the electrolyte abnormalities rather than any specific cardiology issue. So the ECG findings are mostly of PQRST abnormalities, or it may sometimes be also due to arrhythmias. So if the patient or if the dog is suffering with any specific myocardial disease like dilated cardiomyopathy, there are very many abnormalities like arrhythmias. What we can see is atrial fibrillations, or sometimes there will be ventricular tachycardia or ventricular premature complexes, or in very severe conditions there is every possibility of identifying or coming across with any blocks or bundle branch blocks. So we have to identify what are the abnormalities of ECG once we finish the physical examination and we identified the ECG findings. Next, we are still further going ahead into diagnosis component of the cardiac diseases. So once we finish the ECG, and now we go for the X-ray. So the chest X-ray is most commonly used to identify and diagnose the cardiac diseases. So in my previous two lectures, I haven't covered this chest X-ray. So I would like to be a little more detailed about the chest X-ray as a diagnostic modality in cardiology or cardiac diseases. So it is always important to take a left lateral exposure of a dog that is presented with cardiac disease. And suppose if the dog is not very severe, and if the dyspnea is not very severe, and if the dog is cooperative, we can take both the views of exposure, like lateral exposure, and also a VD or DV view is also advised. And most importantly, the X-ray should be taken at the peak of inspiration. So this is to be taken care very, very importantly, because if you take the X-ray at expiration rather than in inspiration, there is every possibility of wrong interpretation. So always try to take X-ray at the peak inspiration. So this is how the X-ray is presented with left lateral exposure here, and this is a video view. But what to find here, what to see, what exactly we have to look for, and most important thing, again, we should remember whether while we are looking for an X-ray, never have a tunnel view. I mean to say that never have presumptive idea before looking for any X-ray. Suppose if the dog is presented with dyspnea, exercise intolerance, and if the X-ray was taken, never make up your mind to look for only heart. There is every possibility of other diseases also, which may also cause similar manifestation. So if you have any primitive ideas or presumptive ideas, or if your mind is prepared previously with some sort of organ dysfunction, then there is every possibility that you will be ending up with error in your diagnosis. So these are the two views which we will be looking for normally, routinely, when we are going for a chest X-ray for diagnosing cardiac disease, because sometimes that are any lesions or any masses or any tumors that are present in the thoracic cavity or attached to the heart may not be seen on the lateral exposure. So those lesions may be seen very clearly if you take an other alternative view, that is in VD view. So that is the reason why we should go for both the views. So as I was talking, what we should look for. So if this is the heart, this is the aorta, and this is the trachea and the vena cava. So here we have two important vessels. We call the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. These two are again very much important to identify and to confirm a congestive heart failure case on X-ray. So the pulmonary artery and the red one and the pulmonary vein should be very carefully observed. And the pulmonary vein should be, if it is dilated and more congested or more bigger in size when compared to the pulmonary artery, we can say that the dog must be suffering with congestive heart failure. Okay, so the main one is bronchi, the aorta and the vena cava. So these are the various structures that we'll be looking in a chest X-ray. So the heart with all the associated major vessels and the lungs. So this, if you look at X-ray at this lateral view, that will give us a gross idea whether the heart is normal in size, the shape, whether there is a normal cardiac silhouette, and whether the heart is, straight, erected, straight above, or whether it is, landing more on the sternum, sleeping on a sternum with increased sternal contact, or whether there is any presence of any congestion of pulmonary vessels or presence of any mass tumors here. So all these things can be identified if you have a chest X-ray, mostly as I was talking initially of lateral view, and also a VD or DV view. Okay, so this is what we do when there is, so here there is an elevated trachea. So here we can see that if you go back to the previous slide, look at the trachea. This is the trachea and this is the aorta. So the trachea should enter into the thorax, so the thoracic cavity, with an angle of about 30 to 40 degree angle with the vertebral column. So this angle is very much important to see as a first observation when we go for an X-ray reading. So if and this is a normal angle, so compare this with this X-ray here. So here, this trachea is elevated. The black one, the gray color here, what we can see is the trachea. So the trachea is elevated and it is almost parallel to the spine. So it is almost parallel to the vertebral column. So this is an elevated trachea, which is a first important aspect of the finding. What we notice it as an abnormal finding in case of dogs presented with cardiac abnormality, mostly of cardiomegaly. So this is because there is a dilatation of the left atrium. The left atrium is present here. There is a dilatation of the left atrium. When the left atrium is dilated, the trachea is pushed above, and this will remove that angle with the vertebral column and makes it more parallel to the vertebral column. So in this case, I can say there is dilated left atrium, because of which the trachea is elevated. So elevated trachea is one finding which we will be looking for when we suspect with cardiac abnormality. And pulmonary vasculature, yes, as I was talking previously, this is the cranial lobe, and this is the cardodorsal lobe or the caudal lobe, where we can see the tram-line appearance of the pulmonary vasculature because of congestion in congestive heart failure. And as seen previously, we can see the pulmonary vein and the pulmonary artery ratio. If the pulmonary vein is bigger in size compared to the pulmonary artery, we can say that the dog is suffering with congestive heart failure. So this is another X-ray where we can compare that with this. So here the trachea is elevated a little bit here, whereas here the trachea is completely elevated and almost in close contact to the vertebral column. So that means the left atrium is much more dilated in this case compared to this case here. And look at this is the right side of the heart. And look at the right side of the heart. The heart is almost sleeping on the sternum. So this is called as an increased sternal contact, which is seen when there is right heart involvement. So here I can say, based on this X-ray, I can say that there is left heart dilatation, whereas here there is a bilateral dilatation of left and the right side of the heart. So it can be DCM of biventricular origin. So, and yes, this is what I was talking about, increased sternal contact. And if it is in V review, we can see that a reverse D appearance. So always see that when you are viewing the dorsoventral view of an X-ray, so whatever the right of you, is the left of the dog. So it should be correlated in that way. Okay, so the left of this X-ray is right of your right of yours. So here it is the right side of the heart, and this is the left side of the heart. Suppose if there is any dilatation of the left side of the heart, this becomes rounded here. And suppose if there is any dilatation or enlargement of the right heart, so there will be enlargement here. So this X-ray specifically is giving us a reverse D appearance, which is an indication of right heart dilatation. And here we have another interesting feature where an X-ray, it is difficult for you to identify the heart. See, so this is the heart. So the heart is almost round in shape, globose appearance. So we say that it is a big heart. We can say that it is a dilated cardiomyopathy, but maybe this may be also due to pericardial effusion. So if it is a dilated cardiomyopathy, this will not become so round in this way, in this shape. Like it may not be so round like globose. So it may be a pericardial effusion. Probably it may be a pericardial effusion. Along with that, we can also see the effusion in the cranial lung lobes and also in the caudal lung lobes. So there is every possibility of pericardial effusion here in this case. So here also there is elevated trachea. And yes, we call it as a globose heart, and the unclear cardiac area. So the cardiac silhouette is almost very much unclear. We cannot clearly differentiate the cardiac silhouette here in this case. So most probably this X-ray may be, the patient may be of pericardial effusion here. And we have here another case which is more predominant and more complicated than this X-ray. So at least we can see a bit of heart here. But here it is very much difficult to identify the heart shadow. So it may be somewhere here. Okay, so and we have again a ground glass appearance here very much, and we can also see a lung lobe here, but it is not very clear. So this is a case of a pleural effusion. So this is how we can differentiate a pericardial effusion case from a pleural effusion case. So in case of pericardial effusion, we can see a globose rounded heart which is very much dilated, but with a clear-cut differentiation between the lungs and the heart. Whereas here we can't differentiate it very clearly, so might be a pleural effusion. Then yes, in the previous X-rays, yes, we were talking about that there is dilatation of the heart, there is enlargement of the heart, there is enlargement of the left heart and the right heart. But what exactly confirms us whether there is any dilatation of the heart or not, whether there is any cardiomegaly or not, whether there is any DCM or not? So for this, what we have to do is like we have to go for the vertebral heart score, VHS, also called as vertebral heart scale finding. So here, this is the trachea. Okay, so the trachea, this is called the carina of the trachea, where it has been divided into two major bronchi. So this is about here. So from here, we have to draw a line, straight line, of course, from base of the heart to the apex. And also we have to draw a line from here to here, which is at the maximum width of the heart. So this is the length of the heart and this is the width of the heart. So when these two lines are drawn, it will give us some sort of measurements. It may be of for example, 11 centimeters or 12 centimeters or 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters, whatever it is, there will be some measurement for this line, right? So this measurement maybe of 5 centimeters, for example, you say. So that may be drawn here, starting from the fourth vertebral column. Okay, so this is first, second, third, fourth. This is the fourth vertebral column, the body of the fourth vertebral column. So starting from the anterior border of the fourth vertebral column, draw a straight line, leave it. So this will be the length of the heart, say for example 5 centimeters or 6 centimeters, whatever it is. And next one is the width, maybe of 4 centimeters. You again draw a line for 4 centimeters. Now count the number of vertebrae that is present here for each line, and that will be the heart score. Okay, I'll give you. So this is what I was talking about. So this is the carina. Draw a straight line for the longitudinal section of the heart, so lengthwise starting from the base of the heart to the apex of the heart. And again, draw another line at the maximum width of the heart. So this will be the length, the blue line and yellow line will be the width of the heart. Now draw these lines from the anterior border of the fourth vertebral body of the vertebrae. This is the length line and this is the breadth line. So now count the number of vertebrae that is present at the length line. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 6. Okay, then similarly for this yellow line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5.5. So this is 6 and this is 5.5. Total it is 11.5. That means 11.5. Now we can say the VHS of this particular dog is 11.5. And the normal VHS is 8.5 to 10.5. Suppose if the VHS is more than 10.5, we say that there is cardiomegaly. And suppose if the VHS is less than 10.5, we say that there is no cardiomegaly. So this is how we can confirmatively say that whether there is any cardiomegaly or not. But if you look at this heart grossly, it won't look like there is any dilated cardiomyopathy or whether that there is any dilatation of the heart. But if you carry out this VHS, this will help us, guide us to confirmatively say that whether there is any dilation of the heart or not. But there is an exemption here. For brachycephalic breeds, normally the VHS will be something more than this, that may be reach up to 11.2 also is normal, because that will give us a very big heart appearance on X-ray compared to the other non-brachycephalic breeds. So for example, if it is a brachycephalic breed, the higher limit will be up to 11 or 11.2. Okay, so this is about the vertebral heart score and heart scale, where we can confirm that there is whether there is any dilatation of the heart or not. Then coming to the confirmation, yes, so far we have studied the physical examination, we have learned about the ECG, we have learned about the chest X-ray. So these are all the diagnostic protocols or diagnostic modalities where the confirmation for cardiac disease is getting stronger point by point, and with every diagnostic protocol. But we can't confirmatively diagnose that, yes, based on ECG, we cannot say that there is a cardiac disease, or based on an X-ray, we cannot say that there is a cardiac disease, or even based upon a simple physical examination, we cannot say that, yes, this has got a DCM, or this has got a valvular disease, etc. But we can say that, but not a confirmation. But to confirm a disease, whether the disease is of myocardial disease, or whether the disease is of a valvular disease, or whether it is a pericardial disease, or whether it is some sort of septal defects, or any mass is there, or any thrombus, any of these things, we have to go for the echocardiography. So in the Indian scenario, for the veterinary cardiology profession, what we have with most of the veterinary institutes, probably the teaching hospitals, is the echocardiography. So if you use this echocardiography, you can do wonders, and you can reach to the confirmatory level of the cardiac disease. No matter what type of disease it is, but at least you'll reach to the confirmation of saying that, yes, this dog has got DCM, or this has got a septal defect, or whatever it is like. But for confirmation, we have to do this echocardiography. So let's see how this echocardiography is going to confirm all our various cardiac abnormalities. So this will, what it is going to do actually, what this echocardiography will help us. This will help us to identify the contractility, whether there is any systolic abnormality or whether there is any diastolic abnormality, and we can study the dimensions of the heart, we can study the valvular motion and whatnot. We can see all these abnormalities that are present within the heart, inside the heart, which cannot be identified either by X-ray or by ECG or by any other means. So apart from this, echocardiography also tells us, in a simple sentence, we can say that echocardiography is going to tell us about the functional status of the heart. So this will give us about the function of the heart, and it will give us the cardiac output. We can ascertain the stroke volume, and the most two important observations what we can what we can reach by using echocardiography is ejection fraction and fractional shortening. So these two are very much important for us to give the prognosis and also to assess the therapeutic efficacy of any patient that is diagnosed with cardiac complaint. That may be a DCM or that may be any other valvular disease. So and now we see how this echocardiography is going to help us with different abnormal cardiac diseases. See, if it is a mitral valve disease, the echocardiographic findings will be in this way. Like we can see the mitral valve area here, where the mitral valves are, there is a lack of coaptation, and you can see that there is hyperechoic nature and lack of synchrony in the closure of the mitral valves in this video. And you can see the kinking or the prolapse or the scaring appearance of the mitral valves. So these are all the abnormalities what we can identify using echocardiography. So this is a echocardiographic feature or a video of degenerative mitral valve disease, where we notice all these abnormal features. So we have same thing here. If we suspect any of these things, so like you can see a kink or the prolapse of the anterior mitral valve here. So this is an again abnormal finding we notice with a mitral valve disease patient. So when we have these kind of findings on echocardiography, the best way of confirmation is a color Doppler, where we can see a mosaic pattern appearance of color flow Doppler ultrasonography or echocardiography here. So this will confirm us stating that there is regurgitation. So we don't know whether there is regurgitation here and whether there is hemodynamic compromise here by looking at a simple B mode echocardiography. But to identify that and to confirm the presence of any regurgitation, and if you notice any abnormal murmur while auscultation, so that things can be confirmed by your color flow Doppler, which gives us a mosaic pattern confirming that there is a mitral valve disease here and there is mitral regurgitation also here. So if you have a further study about the mitral valve disease, yes, you can see the kinking and the prolapse of the mitral valves, posterior and anterior mitral valve. This is an anterior mitral valve and this is a posterior mitral valve, which are actually being prolapsed into the left atrium. Yes, and here you can see there is hyperkinesis. There is increased contractility of the interventricular septum and posterior wall of the mitral, left ventricle. So this is because when the dog is suffering with mitral valve disease, and there is increased contractility. So here, apart from that, in ejection fraction and fractional shortening, the fractional shortening of any dog that is suffering with mitral valve disease will have more than 30 or 35 is the fractional shortening findings. And another important echocardiographic feature what we can take into consideration before confirming that the mitral valve disease is there is increased left atrial lumen. Otherwise say that there is increased left atrial and aorta ratio. So the left atrium will be enlarged, dilated as against the aorta. So this is left atrium and aorta ratio, which is supposed to be 1 1 to 1.5 normally. So if it crosses 1.5, then we say that this has got a dilated left atrium, which is a consequence to that of the mitral valve disease. And this is a pulse wave Doppler where there is a turbulence jet flow appearance, and we can just not only see the turbulence pattern here, we can also study the blood flow parameters. Actually, it is not very clear here. So this is again another confirmation to say that there is valvular regurgitation. So based upon these all features, we can say that there is a mitral valve disease and the mitral valve regurgitation, and probably it will further lead to congestive heart failure associated with mitral valve disease. So this is how the echocardiography is taking the upper hand, and it is becoming more sensitive in making the confirmatory diagnosis of cardiac disease in canine. So this is the mitral valve. Then coming to the next important disease, that is a myocardial disease. What we see here is a dilated cardiomyopathy. See, if you start it again from here, this is a short axis view, and this is a long axis view, the left atrium and the left ventricle is the mitral valve here. Look at the systolic phase of the interventricular septum, and this is the aorta, outflow tract. Okay, so look at the myocardium of the left ventricle. So this is called as systolic dysfunction. So there is a very minimal systolic contractility, hypokinesis of the left ventricle, which is very commonly seen in dogs presented with or diagnosed for dilated cardiomyopathy. So you can see, okay, so this the left atrium and the left ventricle and the mitral valve. So this is how the shape of the mitral valve is supposed to be when there is no mitral valve disease. So there is systolic dysfunction here because the dog is having a dilated cardiomyopathy. You can see the contractions and the hypokinesis and the globose appearance of the heart on the short axis B mode view. Same thing if you go for the color flow Doppler. Surprisingly, you can sometimes see the regurgitation, a mosaic flow pattern here, and this regurgitation or mosaic pattern appearance is not exactly due to any primary valvular disease, but it is due to there is what you call as endpoint septal separation, EPSS. There is an increased EPSS because of the dilatation of the left atrium, left heart. So when the heart, or the left side of the heart with the interventricular septum and the left at the mitral region is dilated, the distance between these two mitral ends, or the mitral valve ends, will be increased. So there is improper closure of these mitral valves because of the dilatation of the heart. So this will cause regurgitation, not exactly due to any degenerative changes in the mitral valve. So these are the two, short axis view appearances where the heart may appear like more of rounded in shape, or it may also look like this with a bit of papillary muscles. Here in this case, there is no papillary muscle appearance, also no mushroom shape appearance, but still this is a dilated cardiomyopathy case, or a heart. This is two other short axis views, and these two are the long axis views where we can see the left ventricle and the left atrium here with the mitral valve here, and here also the left ventricle and the left atrium with mitral valve. So the long axis view and the short axis view of the heart of DCM affected dog. So we can clearly differentiate this from other cases where the heart contractions or the systolic phase is very much feeble, but there is tachycardia. It will be beating in this way with very faster heart rate. And what more we can do with this echocardiography to confirm further the dilated cardiomyopathies? Like we go for M-mode echocardiography here. So in this M-mode echocardiography, you can see this is an interventricular septum where there is a very feeble, very much feeble systolic phase. This is called as systolic insufficiency, or okay, this is called the systolic insufficiency. So there is very feeble systolic phase. This is the systolic phase, a diastolic, systolic, and diastolic. So there is no much very clear differentiation between the systolic and diastolic phases here. So by going through all the dimensions of the left ventricle, what we end up with is the ejection fraction and fractional shortening. So if you look at here, the ejection fraction and fractional shortening is 11 and almost 11.78 and 5.38. So they're very much less compared to the normal values, which is a specific finding for dilated cardiomyopathy, having very poor ejection fraction and fractional shortening. Apart from that, as I was talking about regurgitation or mosaic pattern or turbulence jet appearance also seen when there is dilated cardiomyopathy because of increased endpoint septal separation. So this is the interventricular septum, and these are the hyperechoic peaks. What we can see here is the mitral wall leaflet. So the distance between the left, interventricular septum and the peak of anterior mitral wall leaflet is called as the endpoint septal separation. So this endpoint septal separation will be increased more than 3 or 2.5 in case of dogs that are suffering or having confirmed for dilated cardiomyopathy. So this is the reason why there is regurgitation and there is turbulence jet appearance while we go for Doppler studies. So these are the two things what we have seen previously in the video. So these findings will confirm that the dog is suffering with dilated cardiomyopathy. So both in the dilated cardiomyopathy and mitral wall disease or valvular disease, we notice turbulence jet and mosaic pattern color flow, but the reason for these two different conditions are entirely different. Then coming to, so far what we have seen is left side heart dilatation, left heart, left atrium, the left ventricle. Here is a right heart failure case where what you're seeing here is the right atrium and the tricuspid wall and the right ventricle here, okay, whereas the left atrium here. So you can just compare the left atrium and the size of the right atrium, the tricuspid wall, and the mitral wall. So this is a very typical case of confirming that this has got a right heart failure. So this is again also called as a dilated cardiomyopathy, but this is of a right side heart failure case or DCM of right heart origin. Now, opposite to that of dilated cardiomyopathy, what we have is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where the myocardium becomes very much hypertrophied, thickened with decreased left ventricular lumen here. So this is a B mode hyperechoic cardiomyopathy, and this is an M mode hyperechoic cardiomyopathy, where you can see a thickened interventricular septum, and overall left ventricle myocardium becomes very much thick and there is decreased left ventricular lumen. So DCM is quite commonly noticed in dogs, particularly in specific breeds like Doberman, Boxers, etc. Though it is also seen in Labradors and many other breeds, and also in toy breeds like Cocker Spaniels. Whereas mitral wall diseases are commonly noticed in toy breeds, not very commonly in medium-sized or large breeds. Whereas hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is very rarely noticed in case of dogs, but it is more commonly seen in cats. So most of the times hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is one of the important cardiomyopathy noticed among the cats. Then, okay, so far we have seen the valvular disease, we have seen the dilated cardiomyopathy of the left and right heart origin, and we have seen the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and now it is about the pericardial effusion. So this is a very beautiful video where you can see completely the surrounding hyperechoic fluid is the pericardial fluid, and this is a beating heart here. So you can see this is the right side, right ventricle, and the right atrium. You can see the collapsing of the right side of the heart, collapsed right ventricle. Okay, you can also see it in very clearly here. Yeah, you can observe this. This is the right side of the heart, and this is all the pericardium. Pericardial effusion, the left heart. Now you see this this right ventricle, right atrium and the right ventricle, which is collapsed completely, and there is no diastolic phase sometimes. So this is called as a diastolic dysfunction, which is very commonly noticed in pericardial effusion cases. And this case and the appearance of this kind of finding is called as a cardiac tamponade. So this is a cardiac tamponade case, and with diastolic dysfunction and complete collapse of the right ventricle because of the negative pressure created by the pericardial effusion that is present here in the pericardial sac. Okay, so we have another interesting case here. Try to ascertain what it could be. So this is the heart, and this is the pericardium, inside which the pericardial fluid. But there are certain things which are coming in and going out here actually, which looks like some sort of any hyperechoic structures, and sometimes, and not only that, the fluid itself is giving some crystalline appearance, crystals, presence of hyperechoic crystals here. See here also, this is the left heart and this is the right heart. The right heart is again collapsed. There is cardiac tamponade here. But there are something else what is happening to be seen here. Okay, maybe seen very clearly here. Yeah, you try to observe, look at here, this portion. You can see certain other things which are actually also seen in the pericardial sac. So this is a case of peritoneal diaphragmatic hernia. So this is the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm where inside which the heart is seen. Actually, there is a peritoneal pericardial diaphragmatic hernia. This is a Doberman dog of 8 years. So a Doberman dog of 8 years that was presented with going down in condition, anorexia, continuously and recurrent gastritis, vomiting, and loose consistency of the feces. So this is the only manifestation, and the history that the dog has been presented with. And these GIT abnormalities have been seen with this dog for the past 6 months to 1 year without any other cardiogenic, other cardiac specific manifestations. So when we routinely scanned it for abdomen, we didn't find any abnormality, and routinely we scanned it because it's a Doberman. We scanned it for the heart. So we could find the pericardial effusion, but which is something weird than that of the routine pericardial effusion case. So we made a contrast X-ray, and then we confirmed that there is peritoneal pericardial diaphragmatic hernia. And once it is opened, so this is how it looked like. So this is again an interesting finding where we can confirm with the echocardiography, and you can differentiate with the routine pericardial effusion cases. Then coming to congenital cardiac complaints, yes, we can also diagnose congenital complaints using this echocardiography. So if you look at here, this is the left atrium, my cursor, and the point arrow is the right atrium. And here it is the atrial septum that is supposed to be complete and continuous, that separates both the right and left atrium. So this is the atrial septal defect. We have noticed this. Again, this we have noticed in around 8 years. It was an 8-year-old Pomeranian cross breed. So the dog was presented with routine checkup, not specifically related to any cardiac abnormalities or cardiac manifestations, but when we routinely checked, we could notice that the atrial septal defect. So the same thing, if you see that here in color Doppler, you can see the regurgitation and the mixing up of blood between both the atria. So it is the right and the left atrium. So this is how we can able to differentiate and identify based on the echocardiography. And yes, we can also see some thrombus. Sometimes we can come across thrombus here. So this is a thrombus, a blood clot. It is present in the right atrium. This is the tricuspid wall in the right ventricle, and the left heart. Here it is the thrombus, which is present on in the right heart. And yes, this is another thrombus case where the dog is presented with, and yes, with all these, in both these two conditions, the dogs are absolutely fine, apparently healthy, no specific signs. And the dogs of these two, these two dogs are of more than 7 or 8 years, and they were routinely presented for general checkup because they have crossed 7-8 years old, age. So while doing the routine examination, we could come across these clots. So yes. Now coming to here, it is another interesting case where we have come across, and we can also diagnose a mass here. This is a mass that is present in the left ventricle. So this is the left atrium, this is the mitral valve, and this is the left ventricle, where we can see a mass that has occupied almost the left ventricle. So this is the beauty of the echocardiography, where we can reach into the heart. We can see inside actually what is happening inside the heart, whether there is any thickening of the myocardium, or whether there is any thinning of the myocardium, or whether the walls are not properly functioning, whether there is any prolapse or kinking, or whether there is a tear, or whether there is any septal defects. So whatnot, we can see everything. We can also calculate the blood volume velocities. We can also see the blood volume flow parameters. So all these things can be done using echocardiography, and we can reach to exactly confirmation of the specific cardiac disease. Okay, so that's all about the diagnosis. And once the diagnosis is done, yes, then coming to the next important challenging aspect of canine cardiology is therapeutic management. So the therapeutic management can be a reversible. Okay, so we can reverse the complaint of the case or the patient or the disease when the underlying cause is known. And second thing is when the cardiac complaint has not proceeded to an irreversible myocardial damage or myocardial insufficiency. So when once the case is diagnosed well in advance, before there is an irreversible damage, then we can say that we can able to treat the case successfully, and we can manage the case successfully. And we have certain goals to treat the case. Yes, what are the goals for that, and how actually we are going to manage the case. So the goals of the treatment is to identify and reverse the case, or reverse the complaint at the earliest possible, before the precipitating causes or precipitating causes are dominating. And the next goal is to alleviate the clinical signs, because that is the most important thing, where we can palliatively prolong the life of the animal. And the third thing is to improve the quality of the life and reduce the mortality. So these are the three important goals that are present in front of the cardiologist once once the diagnosis is a confirmatory diagnosis. So to reach to these three goals, we have a different drugs and combination of drugs that are commonly being used. And we have the first among the list is the diuretics. Yes, we have the diuretics, and everybody must be knowing about this, whatever may be the disease, whether it is myocardial disease, or whether it is a pericardial disease, or whether it is a valvular disease, or whatever it is. If the disease is not identified or confirmed or diagnosed in early stage, or if the treatment is not taken care, and ultimately it will lead to the congestive heart failure. So this is what actually the pathogenesis will proceed for, and the prognosis will become very, very unfavorable to grave if the case reaches to a congestive heart failure stage. So in order to handle these things, in order to tackle these pathophysiological effects, always diuretics play a major role in the management of cardiac diseases. So the commonly used diuretics is loop diuretics like furosemide. We can go for at the rate of 2 to 4 mg per kg body weight, and we can go for potassium sparing diuretics like spironolactone, or we can even we can go for more potent diuretics like torsemide. So these diuretics will have a direct effect on alleviation of the clinical signs and well-being of the case, and also it will have slow down the progression of the disease if it is identified well in advance. And the next category of drugs that comes under the management protocol of the cardiac disease is inotropic drugs. The positive inotropic drugs. Yes, these drugs, they actually increase the cardiac output, increase the stroke volume, and thereby alter the heart rate of the of the patient. So here, many of these cardiac patients, they have tachycardia, and when this tachycardia continues for a longer period, and that will further aggravate to have a dilated cardiomyopathy, because tachycardia is also one of the important reasons for cause for the dilated cardiomyopathy. So these inotropes, they will correct the tachycardia and they will bring back the heart rate to the normal levels, and thereby actually improves the cardiac output and the stroke volume. So the common inotropic drugs, since the ages what we've been using for humans, is like digoxin or digitalis can be used, and we have our veterinary specific drugs like pimobendan, and these are nothing but the phosphate diestrase enzyme inhibitors. And apart from that, we have amrinone or milrinone also comes under the phosphodiesterase enzyme inhibitors, which can also be given as an inotropic agents. Next is the most common and very commonly used cardiac medication by many of the vets, irrespective of the complaint, is ACE inhibitors. Angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors like enalapril, benazepril, captopril, and now we have a veterinary specific drugs. We have benazepril, which comes in combination with pimobendan, is also can be used very effectively, which is an ACE inhibitor and inotropic drug. And we have a ramipril, which is again veterinary specific ACE inhibitors. So when these ACE inhibitors are used, and they will prevent the conversion of angiotensin converting enzyme 1 to 2, and thereby it blocks the further subsequent pathophysiology that happens whenever there is a cardiac disease. So here, enalapril and benazepril, ramipril, captopril, so many ACE inhibitors are present, and every practitioner, every vet has got his own choice, but enalapril is excreted through the kidney, and if there is a concurrent renal complaint apart from along with the heart, so we can go for benazepril rather than going for an enalapril. And the next group of drugs what we usually concentrate for cardiac disease is angiotensin receptor blockers. So these angiotensin receptor blockers are not so successful in case of veterinary practice, but they are very commonly used in case of humans. So they are like losartan or telmisartan is a recent one. So these angiotensin receptor blockers are, as I told you, are not so successful in case of dogs, because the receptors for these receptor blockers drugs are very much poor in case of dogs. But compared to losartan, telmisartan is little more effective in case of dogs. Then vasodilators. Actually, we say that nitroprusside is one that is commonly used in humans, but I personally never used this nitroprusside, but can be given whenever the dog is being presented in very critical condition. And along with that, we can also go for dobutamine, which is again a potent vasodilator. But we can also go in this kind of combination if the dog is not normally been responding to a diuretic like furosemide alone. You can go for a combination of diuretic and vasodilator, furosemide and vasodilator like dobutamine intravenously for some time, for 2 to 3 days, to make the parameters come to normal, and then we can switch out to the oral medication. And yes, the another drug in the list of cardiac medicines in case of canine cardiology is antiarrhythmic drugs. Yes, irrespective of the complaint, there is possibility of arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia or ventricular premature complexes. So depending upon the type of arrhythmias, we can go for the specific medication, or sometimes we can go for beta blockers or calcium channel blockers in combination with inotropic drugs. If you go, it is always helpful. And not the least, the nutraceuticals. Yes, I forgot to mention here. Yeah, there are certain amino acids or nutrients that are also responsible for the health status of the heart. Say, for example, taurine, carnitine. So the deficiency of taurine and the deficiency of carnitine also sometimes cause myocardial disease, particularly the dilated cardiomyopathy. So if it is a cocker spaniel, particularly, uh, taurine deficiency will be confirmatorily taken into consideration if it is diagnosed for a dilated cardiomyopathy. So when a cocker spaniel is diagnosed for dilated cardiomyopathy, it is always important to add taurine as one of the uh, therapeutic agents among the prescription. Not only the cocker spaniels, but in case of other breed dogs also, if they are not very much common or um, uh, non-vegetarian diet, so taurine supplementation is also advised along with the other specific medication. Yes, but one point we should remember is like the treatment for any cardiac disease, that may be a DCM, that may be a valvular disease, or a combination of any of these two of cardiac diseases. So the treatment should be always tailored for that specific complaint and also tailored for the specific dog. It is not like a combination of drugs can be given for any of those things. Like we have to choose, and a tailored made prescription is always important for going for a successful management. And when it comes to the point of pericardial effusion, yes, pericardial effusion medical management is of no particular value. The most important and the specific means of managing the pericardial disease or pericardial effusion is pericardiocentesis. So, and it is always important to remember that inotropic drugs or ACE inhibitors or diuretics, they should not be given to any case of pericardial effusion unless and until it is also diagnosed for any congestive heart failure association. So, okay, then coming to the opportunities for a cure, like how far we can say that there is a cure for that. Yes, there are two circumstances to say that yes, the cure can be done and we can cure the case. And these circumstances are if we diagnose the underlying cause, and among those underlying causes also, if it is of nutritional supplement deficiency case, a cardiac disease associated with a nutrition deficiency like a taurine or a carnitine, yes, we can say that the cure can be successful. And at the same time, as I was talking to you, that there are very many causes for cardiac disease like DCM. So if it is related to a tachycardia associated DCM, yes, we can say that there can be a cure for that. But apart from these two circumstances, I don't think there is any other opportunity to say that yes, there is a cure for that. That means the treatment is always to be given for life. So in both these two circumstances also, we can say that it is what do you call it, the traditional kind of treatment that has to be given along with the supplementation of the deficient nutrients. So if it is maintained for about some period like a couple of months, for 6 months to 1 year, we can say that yes, there is possibility for cure. But with respect to the other causes, and if it is happen to be other than these two causes, then probably there is no cure, and the treatment should be given continuously and throughout the life. And finally, after knowing all these, what is the prognosis? The prognosis is always, we can't say that it is going to be a favorable or unfavorable unless we diagnose the case completely. And owner should always be advised regarding the case very clearly. And all the cases of cardiac disease are terminal. That means we can't say that it's not like an antibiotic course where it can be given for a week or 1 month or 2 months and then we can discontinue and say that yes, your dog is cured. It's not like that, except those two circumstances what we have studied previously. All other cases of cardiac disease or all other cardiac complaints or disorders need to be continued, the treatment to be continued throughout the life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Satish, for your wonderful presentation. There are few queries from the participants. Hello? Am I audible, Dr. Satish? Yes.
Yes.
The first query is from Subhashish Roy. Sir, is there any product containing taurine and carnitine only?
No, we don't have exactly those two, only those two presentations. I mean, any product containing only those two. But we have a combination of products where taurine is also present in that, and maybe carnitine also.
Yeah.
But we don't have any exclusive presentations to say that taurine and carnitine are present. That comes with other nutrients.
Okay. Uh, okay. One more question from Dr. Sujata Turkar. How to
Yeah.
differentiate between pleural and pericardial effusions?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
How to differentiate between pleural and pericardial effusions?
Okay. In ultrasonography, echocardiography, you mean?
Yes,
Yes, we can
yes.
differentiate that. Actually, we can differentiate that on X-ray itself, where we can see that the presence of Glober's heart alone will give us a clue that there could be a pericardial effusion, and if there is also ground glass appearance or increased echo density appearance or opacity of the appearance of cranial lung lobe and caudal lung lobe, there could be a possibility of pleural effusion. But if you go for echocardiographic abnormalities or findings, yes, you can clearly differentiate that. First thing is, like, if you go for right parasternal approach, if you do the scanning, you can see the pericardial effusion, where in which the heart is floating with diastolic dysfunction and all that. If you slightly come back and locate the diaphragm. If you locate the diaphragm, and then you'll be looking into the abdomen. You can see the liver, you can see the diaphragm, and inside is the thorax. So if it is a pericardial effusion, you don't find any fluid between the pericardium and the diaphragm. So you don't find any anechoic area if you scan it at the diaphragm region. So if you notice any anechoic area, just immediately within the thoracic cavity, just immediately from the diaphragm, you can say that it is the pleural effusion. So you can do it either from the right parasternal approach, locate the heart, and then slightly come back to see the diaphragm and the liver. You can differentiate it in that way to see whether the diaphragm is closely related or is noticed with the anechoic area. Or you can locate it from the pericardium. I mean, you can scan the heart here, and then coming to the xiphoid region, the apex region, and you can put the probe here, and you can see the diaphragm, and there again you can differentiate whether there is any anechoic area that is very much closely present to the diaphragm. So this is how you can differentiate. And you can also differentiate this, though it is little more, needs some expertise, by through the right parasternal approach, where the pericardial effusion sac, I mean the anechoic area, goes on par with the aorta there. Um, I think I'm able to reach you properly. So there is an aorta here with the anechoic area. If this anechoic area and the aorta are lying in the same position, you can say it is a pericardial effusion. And if the aorta is present here and the anechoic area is coming just below the aorta, you can say that it is a pleural effusion. You can try that.
Okay. Okay. I hope Dr. Sujata Turkar's question has been answered. One more question from Pratik Rajput. Sir, as we can hear all four sounds, that is S1, S2, S3, S4 in healthy horse and S1 and S2 in dogs and cat. So do we have to divide auscultated heart sound values by 4 and 2 respectively to get the true value of heart rate?
No, not exactly.
Hello?
It's not about by 3 or by 4.
Okay.
It is a S1 and S2 in case of dogs, and S1, S2, S3, 4 in case of horses. It comes, then only it becomes a cardiac cycle. The lab dub S1 and S2 in case of dogs becomes a cardiac cycle, whereas in horses, it's not so commonly noticed. S1, S2, S3, S4 are not regularly and commonly heard in case of horses also. So we cannot count them and then divide them by 2 or divide by them by 4. See, lab dub is one cardiac cycle.
Okay.
The lab dub is S1, S2 here.
Hmm.
The lab dub is divided into S1, S2, S3, S4 there in case of horses or other species. So don't count those things, but count for the number of cardiac cycles. That's all.
Okay. One more question from Subhashish Roy. So, is there any product containing, this question has been answered, Yeruvosubo, any parenteral IV positive inotropic drugs if they are available?
Yeah, digoxin can be given. I think digoxin is available, and dobutamine, though it is a beta receptor agonist, but it is a positive inotropic drug. It's a potent positive inotropic drug. You can give this dobutamine at the rate of 2.5 to 5 micrograms per kg per minute intravenously. But this can be tried in very emergency and critical cases, not with every case.
Okay, one question from Preeti Shuran. Why there is edema in cardiac disease? Reason behind this?
Yeah, this actually, whenever there is a cardiac disease, it's not like humans. What we have is blockages or a coronary artery disease, but it is something like what we call as a congestive heart failure. In case of dogs and cats, we say it is a congestive heart failure because there is an anterior and a posterior heart failure complaints are commonly noticed in these kind of patients. So whenever there is decreased afterload or increased preload, all these factors they comes under. So when there is a dilated cardiomyopathy or when there is a valvular disease, there is accumulation of blood within the venous vasculature. So it can be a systemic venous vasculature, or that can be a pulmonary venous vasculature. So thereby several factors that come into role here, thereby that actually causes congestion of these vessels and thereby accumulation of fluid in the lungs or accumulation of fluid within the other systemic circulations like abdomen or pleura, etc. So that's how there is congestion and accumulation of fluid resulting in congestive heart failure. That's why it is called as a congestive heart failure in case of pets.
Okay. Dr. Utpal Burman has asked, sir, can we use mannitol as diuretic in such cases?
No, actually mannitol, though it is a diuretic, is not commonly indicated for cardiac diseases. We have very safe diuretics and very commonly used diuretics like furosemide, loop diuretic, and a spironolactone potassium sparing diuretic, or aldactone. We have a vasopressin suppressor, and we have torsemide. We have many other diuretics that are commonly been available commercially also and available and commonly used for cardiac disease. In my practice and in my experience, I never used mannitol, and I don't think there is nothing wrong in using mannitol also, but I don't think it is advised.
Dr. Sarita Devi has asked, sir, how to manage a heartworm associated dilated cardiomyopathy and low renal perfusion?
I didn't get you. Can you repeat the question?
How to manage a heartworm associated dilated cardiomyopathy and low renal perfusion?
No, heartworm associated dilated cardiomyopathy. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And low renal perfusion.
Yeah. Heartworm associated dilated cardiomyopathy is something different, and low renal perfusion. Low renal perfusion is noticed in any kind of cardiac disease in case of pets. So actually, whenever there is a dilated cardiomyopathy, or whenever there is a valvular disease, or whenever there is a pericardial effusion or any other disease conditions, there is decreased cardiac output, and there is a decreased cardiac output resulting in decreased glomerular filtration and decreased renal perfusion. So this is something different from the first half of the question. So irrespective of the complaint, whenever the dog suffers with any cardiac disease or whenever the dog suffers with a congestive heart failure, there will be associated low renal perfusion, and this low renal perfusion can be managed with giving vasodilators and AC inhibitors, and these things will take care of that. And coming to the other half of the question, what do you call this, heartworm associated cardiac disease. So this heartworm associated cardiac disease can be managed with giving specific medications, and we can go treat it with heartworm specific medications, or sometimes in very severe conditions they go for surgeries, and then they will try to remove it, but it's not practiced in case of India. And I would like to also add one more point here. Usually incidents of heartworm related cardiac complaints are in dogs, or the prevalence is very, very, very low. I don't think it is prevalent in India, except in certain parts of Kerala or in certain parts of extreme north states. Uh, and in other places, this is not a commonly noticed complaint. But if it is identified, if it is diagnosed, we call it as a Cavell syndrome, which can be clearly diagnosed using echocardiography, where we can see adult worms present in the right atrium. And so those things can be confirmatory diagnosed and can be treated with what do you call anthelmintic drugs.
Okay. Dr. Sujata Turkar has again asked, what is microcardia?
Microcardia, actually, it is not a primary complaint. This is seen with secondary associations with hyperetinocortism kind of complaints, where the heart becomes smaller in size. It's not a primary cardiac.
Dr. Subhasis Roy has asked, sir, is there any diet modification in cardiac disease?
Yeah, diet modifications. Yeah, actually, we say that there should be a salt restricted diet because hypernatremia is one of the important biochemical or electrolyte abnormality we notice with cardiac patients. So we usually say that a salt restricted diet. Apart from that, taurine supplementation and carnitine supplementation is also advised. And yes, that's all. Nothing specific, anything about this. And of course, there are commercially available cardiac diets. We can also go for that if client can afford.
Yeah. Tanzil ul Islam has asked, how will we diagnose congestive heart failure in dogs at an early stage?
See, congestive heart failure cannot be diagnosed in early stage. Actually, we say that when there is a congestive heart failure, we say that what are the causes for the congestive heart failure. So we can able to diagnose a case of dilated cardiomyopathy before it becomes a congestive heart failure. We can diagnose a mitral valve disease before it proceeds to a congestive heart failure. So congestive heart failure is the outcome of, or the consequence of the underlying diseases.
Yeah.
So if you want to diagnose a case in early stages, we can diagnose it at the specific cardiac disease level, at the DCM level, or at the pericardial disease level, or at the valvular disease level. That's how we can able to diagnose it before it convert into congestion.
Dr. Sujata Turkar has asked, how to differentiate cardiac tumor and thrombus?
Okay, thrombus, most of the times it is present as a free thrombus that is floating within the heart or the major vessel, as you have seen in video. And if it is a tumor or a mass, it is fixed to either the pericardium wall or within the ventricle or in the interventricular septum, wherever it is located. So, and yes, this is one thing, one differentiating point. And if it is a mass, they don't usually have a uniform contour. They don't have a specific uniform clear contour. Whereas if it is a clot or a thrombus, yes, it will have a uniform contour. That's how you can differentiate.
Yeah, and Dr. Shweta Vyas has asked, in case of cardiac disease, protein supplementation is given, but in renal disease, protein supplementation is avoided. But in case of cardiorenal syndrome, whether to give protein supplement or not?
This is a good question. Yes, we have a complaint, and now the patients are also proceeding with, and the clients and the vets are also being aware about a complex syndrome called as a cardiorenal syndrome or a cardiorenal axis. So when the patient is diagnosed for both cardiac and renal issue, where it is called as a cardiorenal syndrome, it is always important to have a protein restricted diet. Okay, so protein restricted diet is always important in order to prevent the kidney function. And we can either completely restrict the protein depending upon the severity of the pathology of their kidneys, or we can even restrict to the restricted or limited usage of the protein.
Yeah. Again, Dr. Shweta Vyas has asked about management of bradycardia.
Hmm. So bradycardia, as we have seen previously, so when there is bradycardia, usually in case of cardiac disease or in case of congestive heart failures, we don't find any bradycardia, but we notice tachycardia. So when there is bradycardia, we have to not so worry about it unless and until there is any specific manifestations.
Raju Devri has asked which is the best non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug for dogs.
NSAID in dogs
Yes,
means what NSAIDs can be given in dogs? Uh,
yes. Which is the best
no, there
NSAID
is no
for
best
dog?
NSAID actually. NSAID non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are all has got their own significant pros and cons, but any NSAID can given if it is given for a longer period will have secondary effects on kidneys, etc. And we have a gastrointestinal complaints, we have drug induced gastropathy, but we have a COX-1 and COX-2 specific receptor blockers, and if you have a COX-2 specific blockers, so we can go for that we can say relatively better. So among the available NSAIDs, I can say meloxicam is the one which can be given safely when compared to others.
Yeah. Subhashish Roy has again asked, is normally means whether the normal dog normally should be given salt or not.
Yeah,
It
salt
should be
can be given normally. That's not a problem. Yes, yes. Actually, there's a misnormal
yeah.
saying that most of the time
Yes.
people actually asking whether my dog can be given salt or not. Yes, salt can be given. It's an electrolyte. Actually, it is required for routine, physiology of any
Hmm.
living thing. But what is important here is how much to be given.
Yeah.
So it should be like the limit what we take can be given.
Yeah.
If it is given in excess, then the problem arises, just like in humans.
Yeah.
So can be given, not a problem.
Yeah. And Chote Lal Yadav has asked which is the best diuretic for
Yes.
dogs.
Rather than saying the best diuretics, I can say the safest diuretic we start with is the furosemide. We start with the furosemide, and in very acute kind of complaints, when there is a severe congestive heart failure, when the furosemide alone is not effective, then we can go for chlorothiazides. Okay, and a combination of these two.
Yeah.
But as far
Yeah.
as safest is
Yeah.
concerned, furosemide is the best.
Yeah. Anil Singh has asked a dose of digitalis for cardiac
See the
therapy.
digitalization, we call it as a digitalization or the
Yes.
digitalis treatment.
Yeah.
We have a wide range of 0.0025 to 0.0050. Uh, so we can't say specifically, yes, this is the dose just like an antibiotic, but we should start it with anything somewhere between here, and then we should go on continuously using and then monitoring the manifestations. So we can fix it once we notice, the required.
Improvement. Yeah. Yeah. And Dr. Rajesh Agrawal has given a suggestion that placement and position of echo probe is very important for detection of all these cardiac conditions. So please cover this portion also. So
Which one?
probably
What he said?
we'll have to take another probe, placing of the echo probes. That is very important. He has suggested that placing of the echo probes is
Okay.
very important
Yeah.
in diagnosing the cardiac anomalies. So you should take one
I
lecture
think I
on
have
that
covered
also.
this in my last.
Yes,
Okay.
these are all the questions.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
probably he couldn't attend. That's all. These are all the questions, and everyone has liked the presentation a lot. Now, our respected Dean sir, he is not there today because of some unavoidable circumstances. So, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude and thanks to you, Dr. Satish, for your wonderful presentation and also for sparing your valuable time and sharing your valuable knowledge, most importantly, for enlightening all of us about this important topic. On behalf of the committee members and the college, I would extend my vote of thanks to all. I, on behalf of organizing committee, and extend my sincere gratitude to our honorable government, Madhya Pradesh, for inspiring us in bringing in and organizing such a knowledgeable event. I also extend my sincere thanks to the patron, our honorable Vice Chancellor Nanaji Deshmukh Veterinary Science University, Dr. S.P. Tiwari, for his encouragement and inspiration. I thank Dean Faculty, Nanaji Deshmukh Veterinary Science University, respected Dr. R.P.S. Baghel, for guiding us throughout for making this event a successful one. I thank the chairperson of the organizing committee and Dean, College of Veterinary Science and Animal Husbandry, Riva, Dr. S.S. Tomar, for his support, guidance, and encouragement. I thank Dr. Nilesh Sindhu from Luvas, who has always extended his helping hand and technical support for coordinating all the events organized by this college. I thank and I take the privilege to thank all the participants from different parts of the country who have shown great interest in attending this webinar, workshop, and learning and knowing the details of the diagnosis of cardiac ailments. Last but not the least, I thank all the committee members of the organizing committee and all the staff members who have directly or indirectly helped us and put all their efforts in making this event a successful one. I again thank you, Dr. Satish, for sparing your time and valuable experiences with all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.